I'm Deepak Chopra. You're watching New Realities.
Welcome to New Realities. I'm Alan Steinfeld, and this program is about expanding your consciousness, expanding the awareness of who we are in the world, how to live the best life ever, and really open up our minds to new realities. That's why I'm interviewing Thais Harris today. She's a holistic nutritionist, and that's a field I love studying because you can never know enough about nutrition in this kind of toxic world. Thanks, Thais, for being. And
Thank you so much for having me.
what I like about you is that you're so passionate about nutrition, but nutrition not just as a food level, but personal self-love. Why don't you talk about the levels of nutrition that you guide people in? That would be great to start there.
Yes, thank you. So I love thinking about diet as an acronym for daily intake of everything. And it's part of work that I've developed with my husband, who's a somatic psychotherapist. And we, for many, many years have been talking about how much our fields intersect with, we tend to think of mental health as being over here and gut health as being over here and weight issues there and cancer there and all of these different separate parts, when in fact we are one and everything is connected. And so is what's happening inside of our bodies and our thoughts with our environment. And so the daily intake of everything is really work we developed when we've worked with groups. We start by asking people, to see their lives as this big banquet. What are the things they choose on a regular basis? Thoughts can be as inflammatory as foods that we're sensitive or allergic to, right? So we really take this approach at looking, how are we treating ourselves? I work mostly with women. I've worked with a large swath of the population, different conditions, but mostly women aged 20 to 82. And one of the things that we start with in our work together is looking at, how do you usually talk to yourself? What are the first things that come to mind when you look at yourself in the mirror? Because there can be little sort of microaggressions that we're doing to ourselves that we're not even aware of. And so that awareness with listening with curiosity and respect is the first step. Wow. And then the work goes from there, because I work with functional labs, DNA reports. I mean, we can get really specific about the sort of evidence-based, data-driven approach to figure out like what really nourishes you. What are the best foods for you? What are the foods we really want to avoid because they're creating a lot of inflammation? But we can't really do that work if we're coming from a place of punishment, or my doctor told me so, or fear because they have a recent diagnosis. It's not as sustainable as when we build a foundation from self-love and reverence and respect. And then the choices become much more effortless. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Is that your creation, daily intake of everything? Daily?
Yes. Daily intake of everything. Yes.
Really clever. So yeah, people feed themselves toxic thoughts, and we're already living in a toxic world. So what's your approach to helping people? Well, go through the levels. You want to help them detox from what they're eating and their thinking and the information that's coming into them. Like, where do you start in that process of detoxing from daily intake?
Yeah. Depends if we're working on a group setting or private. So I work with people one-on-one. I offer a 3-month package because it takes some time to implement changes and troubleshoot and really get into this work and create the practices that feel sustainable for each person. And I love talking about this notion of building the wagon that you love, because everybody talks about falling off the wagon, right? And I've helped many clients, especially in the beginning of my career, where I would be helping them with meal plans and all, here are the foods, here are the things you need to avoid, here's what we want to add. And we can do that all we want, but if the person doesn't have that deep motivation, the deep connection to like, I really want to do this because I love myself and I want to live well and feel well, then it's not sustained. And so I would often get the emails saying, I fell off the wagon, or I jumped off the wagon. And, or, you know, people just, oh, or I was so bad. And I really wanted to get my clients out of this notion of being good or being bad. It's like, it's not about that, right? And that's when we're responding more into external validation and external values. So the first step when I'm working one-on-one, I do a guided breathing with my clients. I do a huge questionnaire, which is like, it takes some of their time, but it's really necessary to understand, not just for me to understand them, but for them to understand themselves. How are they eating? How do they eat when they're upset? What are things they go to when they want to celebrate? Like, there's a lot of different information pieces that allow us to understand how that person is functioning as an emotional eater. How are they listening to their bodies on a daily basis? Do they make time to go to the bathroom, for example? Some people are constipated because they just don't make the time to have their bowel movement. And after they pass a certain time, then the body is just trying to catch up with them. And so little things that are really about not ignoring ourselves. We get all that information on a questionnaire. We review that when we first meet. And I do this guided breathing that's really about connection to gut, heart, mind, and creating a vision of health so that when people really get in touch with this sense of, oh, this is how I want to feel. This is what it looks like when I'm feeling that way. This is how it affects everybody around me.
Mm.
Then they start seeing themselves in that spot every day and then making choices of, say, for somebody who's really sensitive to gluten, for example, they'll be better able to not have the bread or the Danish because they're coming from this place of like, I love this version of my life that I'm going toward. Versus I've had clients at first say, oh, I don't know that I can ever let go of the Danishes. Like, I think I love them more than I love myself. And it's like, okay, then let's work on that. And slowly but surely they can let go. The stuff that was the treat kind of tends to lose its power when people are really connected to a deeper sense of their vision for themselves.
Well, you know that people feed themselves because they're missing other things. Like even as a child, if someone's been crying, their mother gives them food or candy, and then that becomes a substitute for love. So how do you go back into a person's psychology and detox them from how they feel like they're getting love through food? That's like a huge issue I notice in people. What do you say?
Yeah, it really is. And not only that, I mean, that's one of my biggest pet peeves, like with schools. And, you know, I keep wanting to change certain systems that have been in place for a long time because rewarding children with candy, it's like we're setting up this reward system in the brain that's really toxic, right? So I do think we need to start rethinking that. What are other things that can mean appreciation and love and kudos without, you know, giving our kids sugar? So that's one. But another is this notion of comfort food, which even as a little baby, you cry, we put the baby on the boob, right? Like, which is what we should do. But there's this connection of comfort. Oh, I'm loved, I'm seen. And so it starts really early, even if we're not using the candy. And so the notion was self-love and practicing it daily. So not just going, oh, of course I love myself. Like I treat myself really well. I buy expensive things. It's not about that. It's a notion of really having a practice that reminds us there is love here. There's always love here. So that the little things that mean love to us, so say in the case of candy, they start losing their power. And actually, when we put a hand in the heart, if you want to do that right now, and just put a little pressure there, our body receives that as a hug.
Okay.
Do you want to pause? Do you want me to keep going?
Well, go ahead.
Sure, sure. But when we put our hand on the heart, give it a little pressure, take a deep breath, meet our hand from the inside out, our body receives that as a hug, and hugs as contact with people we love releases oxytocin, which is a wonderful hormone, a hormone of belonging. And so we can actually provide those chemical messages to ourselves if we just create a practice, right? So instead of needing the outside love or the food as love, we can actually start providing it to ourselves on a daily basis.
Maybe we could end the whole interview with a meditation where you could bring people into that breath work and that understand.
Sure.
But yeah, no, that's part of it. So people are addicted to foods because of this lack of self-love, right? But you have to get into their psychology somehow. How do you how do you really break them from the addictions that, whatever that addiction is, you know?
Oh my gosh. I wish I could say I do that by, because I would solve, a big portion of the world's issues. The main thing is actually helping them see that in themselves. And so they are the only ones that can break it or keep it. And for some of my clients, it really is about the connection. So what they're getting in the relationship. For some people, like I said, I start with a 3-month package, but then I have clients that extend that for another 3 to 6 months. But my goal is to really give them the tools so that they can start feeling really embodied in what they're doing. So how they're eating, how they're moving. I talk a lot about joyful movement to my clients because I've had people literally say to me, oh, I run every day and I hate it. With every step, I'm thinking, I hate this, I hate this, I hate this, but I do it. And my question is, why do you do it then? They're like, oh, that's the only way I think I can keep my weight down. And, I know it's good for my heart. However, coming back to toxic or inflammatory thinking, right? If that's the message we're sending to our bodies, that this is horrible and I hate this, that is creating more stress. And the stress alone will sort of wipe out some of the benefits from the run. And so we worked on what are things you really love doing, that you enjoy doing, that you can still get a sweat, still move your body, still get your cardio rate up. And we found dance lessons, right? And now this person was so much happier. And some of the belly fat that she had come to, work with me on disappeared because now she didn't have all that stress, because stress is one of the worst things for accumulating belly fat. It creates visceral fat because of the way our hormones, all of the chemicals that sort of cascade down from a stress response interfere with everything from our immune system, our vagus nerve. It reduces our ability to make neurotransmitters, which are feel-good chemicals. It changes our digestion. So all of the stress that a simple activity might be creating could be contributing to the very problems they're trying to address. So that, like, we get curious, and I feel like my answer to make it concise to you and how I help people with the psychology piece is just to help them create more awareness about all the little things they're doing. Are they finding joy? How are they talking to themselves? Are they actually slowing down to chew their food? I mean, that alone makes a huge impact. So it's the little things that they start becoming more aware of.
Well, you're more than just a nutritionist. You're like a life coach, really. That's what no, seriously, you are.
Yeah. Coaching was a big part of my training, actually. So I'm very, very proud of that because it's so important.
Well, I want to get into the actual foods, but we have a question coming in. If someone doesn't have a lot of time or money, can you talk about the 2-week reset, and then we'll get into like specifics of food and diet and all that, because people want to know that too. Because there's
Perfect. Yeah. And that's such a great question because that's my group program, right? So if we're not working one-on-one, I have these groups. I have two groups. One is a 2-week program. One is a 8-week program. In the 2-week program, we're really focusing on an elimination diet. So we're doing a very gentle cleanse. It's all food-based. People don't starve. It's not like just juicing or just broths, even though broths and veggie juices can be a very healthy part of it. And we really focus on all the bitter plants, the greens that really help the liver detoxify. We focus on hydration. We focus on high quality fats. We focus on adding booster foods. What are some of the booster foods? For example, miso and seaweed, maybe chlorella and spirulina, but some of the foods that actually also contribute to the body running a little bit more efficiently. And we remove what we know to be trigger foods, the top trigger foods. So we remove caffeine because we want to, again, focus on liver health during this short period of time. We remove sugar,
Yeah.
and we remove wheat, dairy, peanuts, and we remove most soy. It's if somebody is vegan or vegetarian and they're doing the cleanse, we keep tempeh, which is fermented. It's a fermented soy product. But otherwise, we just want to avoid like soy milk and a lot of processed soy products. And it's amazing what happens, because in these 2 weeks, there's a lot of education. People get an email every day from me with an education on a piece of this. And also they find something they love about themselves every day, which is another little piece of that. But they get education on even things like, what is their equipment in the kitchen? Are they getting exposed to a lot of, different chemicals from nonstick pans, or using a lot of plastics, things like that. So we really look at that. We look at the cosmetics they're using. And at the end of 2 weeks, they can stay on with me for another week of sort of fine tuning. And I've now have led hundreds and hundreds of people. I've done this for 10 years, twice a year, this group. And I've had people say, wow, after that, I had no stomach pain, and I had experienced stomach pain for 15 years before that. I just thought it was my normal, And it turns out this person was highly sensitive to gluten. So gluten, wheat, anything with those products was very, very inflammatory to her system. I've had people understand that they had a dairy sensitivity, and some other issues that they're like, wow, I didn't know I could feel this energized. So there's a lot we can do in a short time, just helping people identify. And we bring the foods back in. That's the interesting piece. At the end of the 2 or 3 weeks, if people decide to stay for that extra week, we reintroduce the foods that they want to reintroduce once every 3 days. So for example, some people just want dairy right away, or many of them want coffee first. So we might start there. Then 3 days later, they reintroduce the dairy. Then 3 days later, they reintroduce the wheat. And what that does, it just gives them time to understand what it is, if at all, that was interfering with their ability to feel good. Because if we were to just on day, 17 or 22, however, when they're adding back on, if they were to have coffee and pizza and a glass of wine and added everything back at once and don't feel good, they don't know exactly what did it, right? It's probably a combination of them all. But when we reintroduce one at a time, then it's very clear, like, oh, wow, I reintroduced dairy and then I got constipated, I had some bloating and my skin broke out. Okay, that's clear. Now people have a clear felt sense of what that is, and they can then make the changes based on, oh, I want to feel good,
Oh, good. So you start people in a group together for 2 weeks, and you have like a group Zoom, and then everyone kind of shares their experience and says, I eat a lot of wheat, I drink, and then you just set out a kind of protocol for people to follow for 2 weeks. Is that how it works?
Yeah, that's right. And so they start receiving things. It's set up as kind of a class. There's some videos, there are meal plans, and people can choose between a vegetarian meal plan, omnivore meal plan, and an athlete meal plan, because some people need more calories depending on what they're doing. So there's a lot of choice. They have even a mix and match guide, where if somebody doesn't want to follow a plan necessarily, but they want to make sure they're getting enough protein and enough vegetables, then they have a little mix and match guide as well, so that we're all around the same intake during those 2 weeks, but with a lot of freedom and choice of what they're going to choose to put in their bodies, right? And yeah, we meet weekly, and we meet before we start, and then weekly during the sessions. And the third week is a bonus week, because in the beginning of my time doing this, it used to be 3-week programs. They were all in person. And then once COVID hit and I moved all my programs online, and because especially in the beginning of COVID, I felt like people were really concerned about committing for 3 weeks. There was something about that felt like such a long time. I said, why don't we do it for 2 weeks? And then you can choose to stay for the third week. And 95% of the people do stay the third week. So that's great,
No, so where can people find about, what's your website again? It's
nourishtogether.com.
Nourish Together. This is what happens in 2 weeks. You nourish together. So yes, important to drink water, of course, but why don't you just lay out like the diet? Like what do you recommend people eat for breakfast and lunch and dinner? Is there a certain like do you start some people start with like a hot drink in the morning, or some people don't eat anything until like 11 or 12. I mean, what do you think your best approach is for that? Or what do you think?
So I love guiding people to start with, especially if they've never done anything like intermittent fasting or haven't really considered the timing of their meals. We start with 12 hours. 12 hours is a very standard, really safe way to ensure that the body has a break. And I love talking about the liver. You know, we need time at night for the liver to do its cleanup functions. The liver has over 500 functions in the body. It really is not called liver by mistake. Without it, we can't live. And I think of this notion of being in a train station, and if the janitors are trying to clean the floors while people are still walking through, it won't make much of an effect, right? It's almost like we need to close off the station and then let the cleanup happen, and then it's ready for the next day.
Saying 12 hours from like your dinner to your breakfast,
Breakfast.
no food, no water or
Water is great, herbal teas, but no food, nothing that's going to kind of change your blood sugar or anything with, say, some people like having a little fruit at night, and that's fructose, goes straight to the liver, right, to process. So we want to let the liver not have any input so it can do its cleansing process.
oh,
So let's say if you eat dinner by 7 p.m., you're not going to eat again until about 7 a.m. And that's the standard, pretty safe spacing. Now, for women who are premenopausal, menopausal, and even postmenopausal, there's a lot of science right now showing that a little intermittent fasting can be really helpful. And also for anti-aging reasons, I've had clients with, and friends actually with MS that have been trying to extend more of that fasting for cellular regeneration and health. And so up to 16 hours, some people do longer cleanses, but I actually don't do those. And I find that if somebody wants to do a 48 or 72-hour cleanse, to really do it with a practitioner that is their specialty to do that, because it can wreak havoc with our microbiome, and there are other things that we need to really consider, hydration, et cetera. But for my day-to-day and my work with my clients, we can go up to 16 hours. And that means if somebody, and I don't like this notion of I just don't eat until 2 p.m. and I eat late at night. I feel like if somebody wants to go for a 16-hour fast and see how they feel, then we eat earlier in the day. So maybe we have our last meal at 5 p.m. and then we're not eating again until 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, yeah, until 9 a.m. So they're still breaking their fast in the morning, giving their bodies, and protein is the main nutrient for breakfast, right?
protein, which is a protein.
So protein is really what feeds our neurotransmitters, and it sets our body up so we're not craving sweets all day. If we just have a carbohydrate-rich breakfast, which are sugary things like cereals, danishes, all the processed flours, those are starches. They turn into sugar really quick in our bloodstream. We're going to end up with a little, blood sugar rise. The body comes in trying to get that blood sugar out of the bloodstream and into the cells. So we release a lot of insulin. All that sugar goes out. All of a sudden, the brain's like, wait, where's my fuel? And then we keep craving sweets all day. And we go into this roller coaster of like too much blood sugar, too much insulin, take it all out, need it again. If we start the day with at least 20 grams of protein, so what are proteins? I actually have a guide that people can download for enough protein at breakfast. Eggs are pretty good protein-rich food. And I know eggs, we go in and out of being like, it's really healthy, it's not healthy, it's really healthy, it's not healthy. But when we look at traditional cultures, I think it's pretty safe for most people to have eggs. And some people say 5 a week. It just depends on what kind of studies you're looking at. There's a concern with cholesterol, but most people don't actually change their cholesterol just based on the eggs they're eating, because the liver is making up to 80% of the cholesterol in our bodies, right? So that's just a caveat. See if eggs work for you. But they're a great source of protein. Things like Greek yogurt, if somebody eats dairy, that can be a good source of protein, or something like cottage cheese for people that don't eat dairy. Then it can be even a bean. You can make a bean burger and have it as a side with a little egg, or a chia seed pudding. Chia seeds are amazing. They're great for the gut. They can kind of act like a little broom, cleaning up the gut. We have to make sure, if we're eating a lot of seeds like flax seeds and chia seeds, to be very well hydrated, because if we're not hydrated, then those can actually become more like bricks and work the opposite way. But as long as we're hydrated, they work really well to clean up the gut. So a chia seed pudding can have enough protein in the morning. Nuts and seeds. If people like making granola, even if they're a grain-free granola, that can be a really good thing. I would stay away from store-bought, and just making it at home is super easy. And I have recipes on my website for that as well. So those are some ideas.
Let me ask you, because I mean, yeah, I don't recommend eating late at night, like, because then it just sits in your body and it's not even digested. But also for me in the morning, I can't eat like if I'm not hungry. So
Mhm.
I just wait until my body say, okay, it's time to eat. So, I mean, I think the kind of automatic schedules people have can also be, not necessarily the best for them. A Taoist teacher said to me, two things to remember is, when you're tired, you sleep; when you're hungry, you eat. That was like the whole basis for everything, But no, I like what you're saying. I think, yes, intermittent. It might be hard though for some people so used to eating late and getting up and being automatic. So it's like they have to, I guess, trust you to say, okay, I'm going to stop that. But then if it's a habit, they'll get hungry at night. And so what do you say to people if they eat at 7 and they're hungry at like 10 because they're still awake? What do you say as a substitute?
I have a great example for that. And I just want to touch back on what you said, that your Taoist teacher said, because that is perfect. And that's exactly part of the self-love piece, is just helping people really listen to their body. Like I was saying before, sometimes people ignore their hunger cues because they're too busy, or having to go to the bathroom cues, right? There's a lot that we can ignore in our modern
Yeah.
pace of life. And just getting back in touch with that, I think it's super important. And so, to give a clear example, and I want to go back to also warm lemon water. So we'll come back to that in a minute. One of my clients that was always, she had to snack before going to bed. And it was a thing about going to the fridge or going to the cupboards. And she was also hungry, always hungry. Turns out, so one of the things I do with my clients is they do a 3-day diet journal. And they do that. There's an app that makes it really easy to just put in what they ate for 3 days. They don't have to do it forever. But it raises awareness. Oh yeah, I ate that thing and then I didn't feel so good, because now they're seeing, also what they're eating. But for me, the important piece of that is getting a little analysis. I can see like, oh, okay, so you're getting like this much protein, this much carbs, this little fat, or vice versa. You're not getting anything that has vitamin C. There's barely any potassium in your diet. So let's change those little things, right? So it gives me a very targeted way to work with them. And this particular client that I have in mind right now for this example, she was not eating enough protein. And she was she was kind of in a dieting mentality. And so she was always hungry. And I think she felt like she wouldn't be able to sleep if she didn't eat something, which was true in her case. So we upped her protein. We made sure she was having more complete meals. And now she could eat 3 meals a day and not need to snack all day and not need to snack at night. So it was a big change for her. Her body composition changed, her mood. She had been dealing with some anxiety, but part of that is she just was not getting enough of what she needed. And she was having these tiny little meals throughout the day, and it wasn't actually helping her build the body she wanted.
Yeah, no, you're great because you really care about people. That's what I get. You're really there with people. And, I know you had a fantastic healing journey that, I mean, you wouldn't be this passionate if it wasn't for your own journey, right? I mean, you just don't do nutrition because, oh, it's interesting. You do it because it really saved your life in a way, right? I mean, it really did. We don't have
So
to,
Alan, oh, go ahead.
no, you go ahead. No, go ahead. What were you saying?
I was just going to say, if the listeners are thinking, what is this fantastic journey? Because they're very clear. There's 4 big pivotal moments where, diet just felt so important. And at first I didn't know. The first was growing up in a household. Both my parents were overweight. And then my sister was overweight and became morbidly obese and she had the gastric bypass surgery. And there's so much that changed in her life after doing that, both for the better and not. But this notion that, wow, really changing your digestive process, right, can change your life. And like, what are the steps we can take before we get to the point of like needing surgery or needing an intervention that, even though it can save somebody's life, it can create so much pain and so many issues after. And then when I decided to go back to school, at the time I was an actress and a graphic designer, and I was having digestive issues myself, and I sought help from a naturopathic doctor. And just by addressing stress, then stress here comes back, right? And even the self-love work is really about addressing the stress of the constant self-critic and the constant self-judgment, because the body sees that just as bad as being in a threat from an accident or the old tiger running after us. But anyway, so tweaking some stress things and learning how to deal with stress and really starting to meditate for me was huge. But also addressing my diet, which I thought was kind of healthy at the time. I had already had a whole diet thing moving from Brazil to the US. When I first adopted the US way of eating, the SAD diet, Standard American Diet, I gained weight, my mood changed. And so I had already done sort of a first review of like, oh, this doesn't really work for me. And I started just reading nutrition books on my own and making changes. But I got to this point then in San Francisco where I was having issues. I worked with a naturopathic doctor. And just by changing my diet, along with some stress relief, everything changed. Like all my symptoms went away. And that was the point where I was like, okay, I have to really take this more seriously. And I enrolled in school. I went back to school to become a holistic nutritionist. And a month after graduating, my father died of a very aggressive cancer. We had 2 weeks between his diagnosis and his death. It was pretty quick. He was only 64. And so that was another pivotal moment, because then I started studying nutrition for cancer prevention and nutrition during cancer treatment to enhance quality of life and beyond. So then that took me on a whole other path, and I worked for an amazing nonprofit organization called Ceres Community Project. And I was the nutrition manager working directly with cancer patients. So, these are the things, and where you said you see this passion, it's from all of these. And then I had my own skin cancer on top of that. So every piece of our lives, I think, keep pointing us in the way we need to go.
So what did you learn? Like, I guess they all contributed to your whole thing. Was there anything you learned about your own recovery that was different than, do you want to talk about that? Like how you treated yourself and how you really got that final piece to put you on the path of this is what you're here to do, something.
Yeah, thank you. So in 2019, I had this mole that grew in the middle of my face, and I was about to leave. My husband and I, my son, we were going overseas. We took a sort of sabbatical for 6 months, and we were presenting actually in Italy and in other countries on the diet as your daily intake of everything. And what happened was, the Friday before we left, I had taken this mole. It had been sent to pathology. I got the phone call saying, hey, it's a basal cell carcinoma. You need to come in next week so we can remove it. And I said, well, I'm actually boarding a plane on Monday, and I won't be back for another 6 months. They said, okay, but as soon as you get back, come in, because we have to, deal with this. But she said, oh, but if you're going to have any kind of cancer, this is the best one to have, which was kind of a weird thing to hear. But it put me in this place of, well, it must not be that important, right? If they feel like they can wait 6 months, that's fine. And it had been scraped off. So I had sort of I could see it, but it wasn't as evident. And then it started growing again. and this time very fast. And it went from red to brown to black. And it was this thing, I could not see it. Every time I looked at myself in the mirror or caught my reflection anywhere, I started noticing that I would go, ugh. Or, you know, being overseas and speaking at these events, there were lots of pictures taken, and I would look at my pictures and go, oh. And it was just this feeling of defeat and fear. And again, especially because of my dad's death and his mother, who also had cancer. Like, I feel like just the word cancer alone was just such a powerful fear thing that I noticed I was like rejecting my body. Every time I saw it, there was this disgust and rejection, and I noticed how it was making me feel defeated and stressed and tight and constricted. And I realized that's not going to help me heal. I've been trying to help people kind of soften into, what is great about them. And it wasn't until that point that I realized that self-love needed to be a daily practice, because otherwise I was just going back into this automatic fear, rejection mode. And so I started doing a mirror practice. And it was about loving myself in that moment as I was, with everything that was going on exactly as it was. I named the little mole as Squeamy because he was a squamous cell. And we started having conversation, and I wanted to know what he really was there to show me. And I remembered, I wish I could remember this doctor's name. It was somebody I had met through my time at Ceres. He was a pediatric oncologist, and he talked about how he would have his patients, his kid patients, imagine a light, like a sword, like a Star Wars, sword, that light going straight into the place where they were either getting surgery or being treated for. And he said, it gave the kids this notion of power, that they could also help their own treatment. And he credited his high success rate because of that practice. And so one day I'm in the mirror, I'm having my little talk with Squeamy, and I remember this practice. I'm like, why don't I do it? And so I started doing this process with the breathing, and then gathering this light in my belly, gathering all the wisdom from my ancestors, gathering all the wisdom from my microbiome, right? The trillions of organisms that live in me, on me, and gathering that light and then shooting it straight at that little spot in my face, and watching it clear and watching it clear and envisioning it clearing and just clearing. And a little over 2 weeks after I started that process, Squeamy popped off into my fingers. I kept him. At that point, I had already made an appointment with a surgeon in Denmark. I was in Copenhagen at the time. And so I brought Squeamy to her, and I said, I really believe I healed myself. Here are all the things I did. And so she looked with her dermatoscope. She's like, yeah, she couldn't really see anything, but she said, yeah, you probably didn't heal yourself. It doesn't happen quite that way. And so we need to operate, and we need to take a margin of error, because there could be still cancer there, and you don't want that to be the case. And being the mother of a young kid and having my cancer fears, I said yes. And so now I went through the surgery, right? I had the pain and everything. It was just very weird to feel like, wow, this area just healed. And now we went and dug in there and messed with it. But it gave me peace of mind, because the whole sample was 100% clear. And after that, I had 6 more surgeries, because I ended up having other spots that showed up with different kinds of cancer, including a superficial melanoma. But I had that practice, and I felt so empowered in a different way. I still worked with my doctors. I still had surgery, but I felt really empowered going into them. And my skin healed so fast after the surgeries that I do credit that with this practice, and this concept. And if nothing else, it just helped me love myself through it, because when you're in the system like that and you're going through these surgeries, it can feel pretty powerless.
So it was really that self-love and that practice, and you still do the practice, of course, of self-love. And that's probably the number one dietary rule, in a sense, that you give people, is that self-love. It starts with the energy you're putting into yourself, And then, of course, what you're taking in from maybe toxic people around you. And you also talked about, digital information, clearing that from your field. So do you want to talk a little bit about, but thank you for that story. I mean, very sweet and beautiful. And that's,
Yeah, thank you. That's actually in the book, The Life-Changing Power of Self-Love. A lot of what I wrote in my chapter, which is called No More Cringing in the Mirror. It's a lot about that particular story. So thank you. Thank you for listening. And yeah, I think, go ahead.
well, I'm just saying thank you for sharing such an intimate part of your life, because it's deeply personal, that those journeys. But you're a teacher and you're here to help a lot of people. So, and that's what you're doing. So yeah, give us the big picture of detoxing from the environment and digital media and things that are impacting us. And I mean, food, yes, is important, but the whole other stuff too that you coach people with is great too. So yes, please share.
Yeah. So there's so many amazing people too in this field that I have read and look up to. So including, we mentioned Bruce Lipton, Dr. Joe Dispenza, and they're people who are, doing science, meaning like Dr. Joe Dispenza has, thousands of brain scans to show the power that our thinking has on our reality. Bruce Lipton could show how our environment affects our cells, right? That this notion of our cell's main brain being actually the brain of the cell, because it's deciding what it lets in and what it takes out. So is it letting in nutrients and taking out the trash, letting out what's toxic? If that membrane is rigid, and by the way, we need healthy fats to keep those membranes healthy. They're made of lipids. But if that membrane is rigid, now we're not letting in nutrients, we're not letting out toxins, and the cell can start getting damaged. So likewise, if we think of our whole bodies and what we're putting into our psyche, right? What we're putting into our thinking, we get to decide what is nourishment, what do we want to let in, and how can we let things go out. So when I talked about my group cleanse, it really is a process of cleansing the body and cleansing the mind. I've had people come to me and say, wow, I cleaned up my whole house, I reorganized my furniture during the detox. They start really getting so keenly aware of their environment and really cleaning up their cabinets that were full of cosmetics that were not great for them, right? But this notion of really understanding what is inflammatory to my life, and is it something I can change? For some people, maybe they have a job they don't really like and they feel like they can't change that. Totally understand that. But for example, I used to drive my son to his childcare, and I had this little smart car at the time, and I would drop him off. I would put classical music on, drop him off at childcare, and then go to work at Ceres, where I was working with our cancer patients and with the teenagers that worked in our kitchens and gardens. And then I would change the channel to the news and drive the rest of the way. And after doing that for a little while, I realized how inflammatory that was to me, because I would get all tense, and especially if it was like election time or whatever was going on in the world, I would get inflamed. And then I had to cleanse myself again to enter Ceres, because we had a pact that we would leave toxic things behind to really enter a healing space to make these meals for our clients. And I asked myself, why am I doing that? Why am I keeping a beautiful environment for my son until I drop him off? And then I get all inflamed again. And then I have to cleanse myself again. Like, just stop listening to the news in the morning. Just don't do that. And so I just kept the classical music or jazz or whatever it was all the way through. And it made a huge difference in my day. We may not notice it 1 or 2 days in, but after a month, you bet there's a big difference, right? So really noticing what are the things that really nourish me and what are the things that are taking away my energy, my power, and then we start letting those go. Part of that is the food, for sure. Part of that is the thinking. Part of that is the media or scrolling on social media, if we're getting comparisonitis and start feeling like we're less than and we're not doing enough, then just saying, I don't scroll. Go in if you have to post something, if you have to connect with somebody, and then go right out, because that alone is creating a lot of issues in the psyche, especially of teenagers.
So you're really helping people tune into their bodies and keep checking in what's really feeling good, what's stressing you, and be really much more sensitive to their internal environment, right? So it's like you're coaching people to just stop and how you feel, and of course you've used yourself as a great example of that. And how do you also write a children's book? So how do children do that? Because they're pretty automatic and they're running around. I mean, they're great, full of energy, but yeah, hold up your children's book because it's like you work with. Yes,
So
yes.
here's Little Red. It's interesting. My first job after nutrition school, I worked at a company called Rainbow Chefs, and I was teaching nutrition and culinary skills to kids in schools throughout the Bay Area. And then I went to work with cancer patients, right? And I always had a private practice throughout. But when I left Ceres, it was because I really felt committed. I need to work with women and families. I need to get to people before the cancer diagnosis, before the pre-diabetes. I really need to, send this message and work with people early on, knowing about my own family, and all that I grew up with, how important that work was from the beginning. And unfortunately, because of the chemicals, the food colorings, the plastics, everything that's being put into our food system right now, which feels really out of control in some ways, our kids are exposed to really junky, terrible ingredients on a regular basis. So I then focused on, I created a course for parents called Raising Stronger and More Resilient Kids. And I have a program that I teach locally in my community for kids, and also to help the parents just understand a little more about how to feed the kids for success in this way, that it's about, body success, that it's about health. And the self-love piece. Oh, go ahead.
No, just saying, give us a little tip about how to feed your kids for success and health. I mean, what would you say to parents?
The first thing is notice your own, what you're modeling. So notice your own behavior in the kitchen, in the fridge, whether it's eating late, snacking, eating super fast, all the things, because our kids are looking to us what we do, not what we're saying to them, right? And so if a kid is being told to eat their veggies, but the parent is not eating their veggies, guess what? They're not going to eat it, right? So just notice how you're modeling, and not to give somebody something to judge themselves for, because moms already have so much doubt, and there's already so much that can happen when you're raising a kid. Trusting the love is always there, and I know my parents love their kids just as much as I love mine. And then it's about the little things. Notice how you're talking to yourself. If in front of your kids you're always saying, delete my picture, I look awful, and just start diminishing that, because they will start becoming their own inner dialogue. And that's a lot of women I work with. Their mothers were often dieters, and so there's something that we all kind of adopt from our parents. So we start by modeling. So eat the veggies, always have veggies at the table. So for the meals that you have together, instead of having chips or other things that people can snack before a meal or during a meal, have a platter of veggies. Talk about food. Let them pick foods in the grocery store from the produce section, something they're interested in experimenting with. Let them be part of meal planning. Everything that feels empowering, kids are really excited to do. Where possible, if you have a small garden, or even if you can just grow some herbs, it can be something you can plant with your kids. When they're involved in planting something and then harvesting it and then cooking it, they're much more likely to eat it. And that's
Right.
the best things.
What's your book? Is your book written for children then? Is that like a...
Yeah, for children. And it's Little Red, the apple who wanted to sparkle. So this Little Red has a big dream. And throughout the book, we understand how she achieves this dream. She wants to shine, and sparkle like a star, but she doesn't know what the use of that is. At the end of the book, because this little boy is able to get her, and eat her. Yes, our main character is eaten, but she stays alive. She is the sparkle in his eye, and she gives him all these benefits, you know, and continues to be part of his life. And at the end of the book, there are a list of benefits of apples. And then there's an apple recipe for parents to make with their kids.
Well, it's great. And also, I like that the apple lives on through us. Our food, you know, is the nourishing aspect, and it does, we are empowered by the foods that are empowering us to live, to feel more healthy. I love green veg. I taught my parents didn't even eat green vegetables, but I was reading enough nutrition and said, wow, this tastes good. Vegetables taste good, you know, and also eating bread. You know, I had a lot of allergies when me and my brother both had we went to allergy doctors. And then when I was in college or after, I said, maybe it's a wheat allergy. I stopped eating. It was really hard to stop eating all wheat, you know, with pastas and all that gluten. But I did, and all my allergies cleared up. And my brother's still eating wheat, and he's still having allergies. And I said, you know, maybe you should stop eating wheat. He goes, yeah, maybe, but you know, it's a choice. You can only
Right.
and that
The
might.
benefit doesn't feel like enough of a benefit, right? And I think that ultimately that's the connection for people. It's like, what is the benefit here?
Right. It wasn't, yeah, the comfort that people get from certain foods and or their coffee or worse, alcohol, that's more beneficial for them or feel than feeling good, or not more beneficial. They're used to that. That's their comfort zone. So you really have to go deep into people's psyches and free them from their own habits and say, no, you can live a better life with different strategies, right? I mean, is that sort of.
Yeah, there are ways to make sweet things that still, you know, because we are all emotional beings. So yes, we do emotional eating. Like it's not a bad thing. It's not something to be judged for. But we can I have these brownies that I make that are made with zucchini and nut butter. They don't have any flour, and they have cacao, which can be a very healthful food. Good quality chocolate actually has a lot of benefits from its polyphenols. Anyway, but so you can still make something that's scrumptious and delicious and have that dessert or have that special thing without wreaking havoc in your health. And I think that's part of helping people identify. Like I said, if we use labs and we're looking at their food sensitivities, and maybe we do a gut test to just see if they have any leaky gut, microbiome imbalance, called dysbiosis, or if maybe there's parasites, or like we can really look into very specific things that could be happening. And then we look at the strategies, like how do you still have, you know, food that you really love to eat. And for example, for some people, they can eat brown rice pasta if they really love pasta and it's not really messing up their blood sugar. Like for me, it's rice products are hard because my blood sugar goes sky high. But there are ways to do it, and I can eat, you know, maybe a little protein. So say it could be animal products. I personally eat meats and things like turkey and chicken, and so I can and fish. So I can have my fish and my salad and maybe a little pasta, and then my blood sugar doesn't go as wild. But so I help with my clients. My 8-week program, I actually give a continuous glucose monitor to my clients for a month, so they can really see real time what is food doing to how they feel, to doing to their bodies, and especially looking at blood sugar. So they can get a different kind of understanding of how to support themselves.
Right.
3 takeaways from today that everybody can do. They're free. You can do it in your own time. First thing is to really be mindful of how you are speaking to yourself. So just start noticing with compassion, with curiosity, not as, you know, another thing to criticize ourselves for, but just notice when you wake up in the morning and you go brush your teeth, for example, and there is a mirror there. Do you look at yourself? Do you greet yourself? Or do you have any thoughts that are negative? That's really important to notice. And I asked about, do you greet yourself? Because ignoring ourselves can be just as harmful, right? Imagine this. I have my son who's 9 years old, Every day when he wakes up and we first see each other in the morning, I say, good morning, kiddo, right? And I love it. I love seeing him. It's like it's a sunshine moment for my day. If I just got up and went about my day without even saying hello to him, his experience would be very different in life. And so we can do that for ourselves. If we're just ignoring ourselves on a regular basis, let's change that. So whether we're saying something negative or going, oh, you look terrible, or we're just not even acknowledging that we're there. One of my clients said to me once, she's like, it's not that everybody else comes first. It's just that I'm not even there. I just don't even acknowledge that I'm there. And that's something we can change. So notice your first response at the mirror. Then once you understand what your usual pattern is, right, now you can start replacing the negative with the positive, or you stop ignoring and start acknowledging. And that's the second part of like change your narrative. And the third part is creating a clue and a way that reminds you to do this daily as a practice. So for example, some people like putting sticky notes on their mirror and it just says, good morning, beautiful, or you've got this. Many different ways to do it. Some people have a gratitude journal or even a self-love journal. There are such things out there. If people look up self-love journal, you can actually buy something that's very nice and has prompts so that they have it by their bedside. So they are reminding themselves to do that, right before they go to sleep or first thing when they wake up. So there are many ways to do that. And if people have a meditation practice, they can start, instead of just going into meditation, they can start by actually acknowledging, like, I'm here. There's love here and I'm worthy of it. And so first step, curiosity, paying attention. Second step is changing the narrative, how we're talking to ourselves. Replace everything with a positive or even neutral phrase. So for example, instead of thinking, I look terrible, is, oh, you've got that spark in your eye. It's going to be a great day. You can get to the point where you're actually looking in the mirror and saying, I love you, and believing it, right? And then the third one is just setting yourself clues so you actually remember to do that every day.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate everything you've said, all your wisdom, all your practical knowledge. Let's do more shows because I think I really like your approach to nutrition. And nourishtogether.com is your website, and you have that sparkle in your eye as well. So thanks for being here. And yes, nourishtogether.com. You do private consultations, you do group events, you do lectures. Actually, I think you should write a book. I think you have a lot of good stuff that would be right.
I have a new book, and I actually submitted it to Hay House, and I got an honorable mention. So that's in the works, and we'll see more of that coming up soon.
At some point. And yeah, all your recipes and original ways. Thanks so much for being here on New Realities.
Thank you so much, Alan. It was such a pleasure talking to you.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Jan Goldstaff, for making this happen. And see everyone soon. Thanks for watching. Bye.